Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this new edition of Africa Today, where we get you the latest news taking place on the African scene. And we are going to discuss today two topics: the participation of Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry in the preparation meetings for the upcoming African Summit, and the situation in South Sudan. But we'll first have a look at this report. Nigeria's top security official ruled out the need for a United Nations or African Union backed force to fight Boko Haram, saying the country and its partners could handle the threat. More details in the following report.
Nigeria's top security official ruled out the need for United Nations or African Union-backed force to fight Boko Haram, saying the country and its partners could handle the threat. Possible enhanced international support against Boko Haram will be discussed on sidelines on the AU summit later this month, given fears about the group's threat to regional stability. But National Security Advisor Sambo Dasuko, a former army colonel, said wider assistance would not be necessary. Representatives from Nigeria, Niger, Chad and Cameroon met this week to thrash out details of a new regional force to counter the rising threat from the Islamist militants. An existing force made up of troops from Nigeria, Niger and Chad appears to have collapsed in disarray even before the January 3rd attack on its headquarters near the northeastern town of Baga. Troops from Niger and Chad were not present during the raid, which saw Baga razed and hundreds of civilians, if not more, killed in what is feared could be the insurgents' worst atrocity. Boko Haram has seized dozens of towns and villages in the northeast in the last 6 months and now controls the border of Borno State, Chad and Cameroon.
Welcome back, and we'll have a look at this report. Also, Sierra Leone removed Ebola district quarantine measures intended to curb the spread of the disease, declaring victory is in sight after a sharp drop in transmission. More details in the following report.
Sierra Leone lifted crippling nationwide restrictions on movement put in place at the height of the Ebola crisis amid signs that the deadly epidemic was retreating. The nation of 6 million had restricted travel for around half its population, sealing off 6 of its 14 districts and numerous tribal chiefdoms in response to an outbreak which has killed more than 3,000 Sierra Leoneans. The move marks huge progress in a crisis which has seen commerce all but grind to a halt, with travel restrictions hitting the rural communities particularly hard and sparking warnings of a looming food crisis. Sierra Leone is targeting 0 new cases by March 31st of the deadly tropical fever that has killed around 9,000 West Africans over the past year, according to official data, although the real toll is thought to be significantly higher. The country announced earlier that it would end risk payments to healthcare workers dealing with Ebola, but that date and reopen schools, with teaching expected to resume in third week of March. The World Health Organization said in its latest update that 1,626 people have died as of January 18th. Liberia, which had a peak of over 300 new cases a week in August and September, registered just 8 last week, while there were only 20 confirmed cases in Guinea last week against 45 the week before.
Welcome back, and we're joined today by Ambassador Ahmed Haggag, former Secretary General of the African Society. Thank you, sir, for joining us.
Thank you.
Sir, we would like to start first with the participation of Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry today in Ethiopia in the preparation meetings for the upcoming African Summit, and we would like to know the importance of Egypt's participation in this summit.
For several years now, the African Union used to hold 2 summits every year, one in January and one in June.
Right.
And there was some preparation meeting, permanent representatives. That's why the ambassadors, African ambassadors to Addis Ababa will prepare, and the foreign minister, which called the executive council, and then the summit, which will be held on the 30th and 31st of January. Egypt is one of the major players in the meeting of African Summit and foreign ministers, and this meeting will witness the discussion on an Egyptian proposal to establish a mechanism inside the African Commission dealing with negotiation and mediation in conflict areas, and trying to prevent conflicts before it is starting already. It needs some imagination, it needs some resources, it needs some commitments from African countries, and I think the Egyptian delegation will explain this thoroughly in the meeting with the foreign ministers. The other one, the theme of the African Union Summit will be gender issues, enabling women in Africa to have sustainable development and promote the involvement of African women in African economy and social life. And it was decided that the general conference in the meeting from the African Union will be held here in Egypt, and the initiator of this initiative is a very prominent Egyptian lady. Her name is Amani Asfour, who is very well known in Egyptian and African circles.
Right, of course. We're going to move on to the situation in South Sudan. 3 years now, and South Sudan is locked in violence. How do you see the humanitarian situation in South Sudan?
It is still catastrophic, and as soon as the fighting between the government and the rebels started, more than tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of the population of South Sudan have been stranded either as internal displaced person inside their country, or they have went as refugees to neighboring countries. And there are some marauding fighting groups which are trying to confiscate the humanitarian assistance coming for those people affected by the fighting. And many meetings have been held between the rebels and the government to no avail. And they had meeting in Addis Ababa, in Khartoum, at the United Nations. There are some international figures which went to mediate between the two sides. One of the latest agreement, which took a lot of support internationally, was held in Arusha in Tanzania, where Mr. Salva Kiir, the president of South Sudan, and Riek Machar, his former deputy president, agreed to what they called reunification of the SPLM, South Sudanese party. Which
that was the agreement signed on January 21st.
Yes.
How do you evaluate this agreement, and how do you see the implementation of the different items of the agreement?
I don't want to be overly pessimistic, but as soon as the delegation left, accusation between the two parties ensued. The government accused the rebels of sabotaging a big oil tank reserve.